Welcome to Plug and Pay, a talk show where we talk to payroll professionals from all over the world about topics that are moving and shaping the global payroll space. My name is Mark Oliver Fiedler. I'm the CEO of Payzaar, and I'm the host of this show. Every couple of weeks, we record a new episode and we release it through our YouTube page, our YouTube channel, our LinkedIn page, and you can also find these episodes on pretty much all the major podcast platforms. You can see today our backdrop is a little bit different from our normal episodes. I'm actually traveling. I'm visiting my folks in Germany, so I've decided to try to do this outside. We'll see how it goes. But that explains why we're looking a little different than normal on the show today. But I'm very excited that for this episode we have Senad Isovic. He is the Head of Global Payroll at Prosus. Senad and I have been talking for the last year and a half, I think, bouncing around a lot of different topics and ideas of what's going on in the global payroll space. He has a lot of experience, and I'm excited to have him on as a guest today. Senad, welcome to the show. And I thought to just get us started, maybe you just want to let people know a bit about yourself, what you've been experiencing, and what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction, Mark. So I've been working in payroll since 2007, always in the Netherlands, and basically worked for almost 7 years for a Dutch company called Ratio, as an external consultant, basically to other companies, right? So that was a great start to get going in the payroll, because I got to see a lot of different companies, departments, systems. So that was really, the kind of best experience you could get from the get-go. After that, I worked for different companies, bigger companies, also like ADP, Streamline. Last couple of years, also worked for myself as an independent contractor. And in that role, I got an assignment at Naspers, Prosus, a South African company, technology investor. And I started working for Naspers in April 2020, just before Corona really started across Europe. That meant working remotely from the get-go. Half of my team is based in South Africa, the other half is in Amsterdam. So there were obviously some challenges to start off with. Mainly that everything needed to go ASAP, online, digital. That was really a struggle in the beginning. We are now 2 years further and discussing the new opportunities for payroll, basically, which this whole last 2 years have had a major impact on. And that's my role now, heading up the payroll of Naspers Prosus, and looking forward to this discussion about the future of payroll.
No, absolutely. I love the background where you have sort of a mix of, working as an independent contractor, now kind of in a full-time corporate role or running a payroll department, but you've also seen the provider side. So I think that gives you a very, very interesting 360 perspective on, what happens and what works and what are some of the challenges in the payroll world as well. So talking about your background, I did a little bit of research, and I came on your LinkedIn profile across sort of mission statement that you put up there, that I thought was quite interesting, relative to the discussion that we're having here today around, what do we think payroll, how can payroll sort of evolve? And your statement says, one of my goals is to get payroll on the same level as finance and HR, an independent department supporting important business decisions by offering reporting analytics and providing world-class service. And I think it's a very interesting statement, because I think most people in the industry have sort of come to accept that payroll lives either within HR or within finance. And you're kind of putting a different proposition, a different vision out there. And I was curious to hear a little bit more where that's coming from, and where you think that sort of should take payroll.
Yeah, indeed, Mark. Thank you for the interest shown in my profile. Indeed.
I'm always stalking interesting people out there, so be careful. Be careful what you put on your profile. It might end up in a talk show.
Basically, based on my experience in the last 14, 15 years working in payroll, and having this experience working for different companies, and of course, payroll was always under either HR or finance. It's kind of a 50-50 split, right? For several reasons, you can make a case for both. But payroll is actually neither one of them for 100%. So we depend a lot on HR, obviously, on the input side. Depending on the type of company you're working for, sometimes less involved with finance or heavier on the finance side as well. But basically, payroll, because it has such a wealth of data, we are in this unique position to support different departments, not just HR, finance. We are talking about rewards as well, which can be impacted by our own analysis, right? So that's really what I see in the future for payroll, is a standalone department, not part of HR or finance, standalone department servicing the business in a strategic way. And I think that will definitely be the case in the next 10 years for sure.
And in your experience, have you seen any situations where you think if payroll had not reported to HR or finance, but been more standalone, it would have made a difference in terms of what would have happened, how a certain situation or project could have succeeded better?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some things which seem like typical HR things, like workforce planning, right? Actually, we got more data on that, right? Whether it's on workforce planning, where to hire people, which countries, which entities, we have far more data on it than sometimes HR does themselves. So we assist in that, right? So what is the best hiring country for our businesses to expand? So these are all basically strategic decisions that payroll can have its footprint on, and based on that, the business can make an informed decision. And same goes on terminating people, or actually sometimes even seeing what kind of people could leave the company for what kind of reasons, right? So you could have, we're talking here about management performance, we have engagement surveys coming from HR. So there are some things that you can actually predict. And on the other side, we also cooperate very much with the rewards teams on salaries, bonus structure, shares, right? So there are many aspects of the business decision making that we can impact.
So that's great, Senad, and I think that leads nicely into one of the questions that tends to come up a lot on this show that we like to discuss with our guests, which is the famous seat at the table, right? That a lot of people in the payroll industry like to talk about. Should payroll have a seat at the table? How can payroll get a seat at the table? And just from the guests that we've had on this show, we've heard already a number of different views and opinions. And I'm curious, since you have a very distinct vision for payroll as a department, relative to this seat at the table, being part of the senior decision-making team, how does that sort of tie into your vision for payroll?
Well, it goes hand in hand basically, because one of the always most important things to a business is basically retaining the talent, right? Every company wants to keep their best people, right? And actually, if you're talking about engagement, which is a typical HR topic, obviously, I think one of the most important elements, if not the most important, is of course salary, right? That's how you basically keep people. If that's not correct, then we could be talking about other things, but those will not have the same importance. So from that,
if you don't pay people correctly, they're very quickly, it doesn't matter how well you treat them otherwise, if you give them...
Indeed. So if that goes wrong, nobody really cares about the free lunch and
exactly.
those kind of perks, right?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it's super crucial to the business, seat at the table. Now, and that's kind of an HR topic, right? Looking from, let's say, an example from a finance perspective, is basically getting some insights into all these data that payroll has or could have, right? Using the correct systems. Now, the biggest issue there, which we are also facing, is how to get that data quickly and in an accurate way while managing payroll for 15 plus countries, right? With all different providers and systems.
Yeah, so how do you do that? I mean, I think the fact that payroll sits on lots of data, as you mentioned, probably some of the most reliable and accurate data, very detailed information that doesn't exist in a lot of other parts of the organization, is a real asset. But on the other hand, I think we see lots of organizations that struggle to really get their arms around that data. So talk a bit more about why you think that is, and how organizations that you've maybe worked in have gone about trying to address that.
Yeah. So sometimes really, I think most of the time it's a simple reason, right? Because every department is kind of doing their own thing, lack of communication, lack of seeing this, what it could be payroll, right? What kind of importance it could have. So it basically comes to those things. And if a company is not aware of that, then, you don't know about it. So why should you invest time and money in such a concept? So I think it comes from a very practical reasoning. But the biggest struggle for companies, especially the multinationals, at least operating in Europe, as we know, and managing multi-country payrolls, is this: whether they choose the outsource model within, for example, ADP, or they keep it in-house. Both benefits and disadvantages to both concepts. We as a company kind of want to have the best of the two worlds, being efficient, but also being very flexible in the countries. And now, Mark, what's happening is basically, we have to open up new countries pretty quickly. So flexibility is definitely a key aspect in all of this. How do you become, standardized payroll operating department, which is important because if you have the efficiency there, you have more time for the service, right?
Yep.
And I think, for me, payroll is, of course, about this efficiency, the data, the technology, but also the world-class service. It's not like one or the other. And that's kind of the thing with finance or HR. It's usually HR is more focused on servicing the employees, while finance is more about the numbers, right? And I think for payroll to take that next step, both are essential.
Okay, so it's both efficiency and the service quality. You can't trade off one versus the other. Become really efficient, but then let the quality drop. But you also, I heard you say the word flexibility, and you mentioned that. I guess you're in the context of an organization like Prosus, you're opening up new countries, you're maybe growing in some countries, maybe you're shrinking in other countries. That has an impact on how you want to run payroll. In certain situations, you might want to take more control, bring it in-house, or keep it in-house. In other situations, maybe there's just not enough critical mass that's, justifies hiring an in-house team, so you need an external partner, and in certain situations might need a partner that does a lot more for you than just payroll. So with that sort of flexibility, how do you combine the flexibility and the standardization? I guess is sort of the big challenge, right?
Absolutely, it is. I would say one of the biggest challenges for the multi-country payroll, because indeed the world is changing fast. New complexity added is the working remotely option, right? Basically, you want to work anywhere you would like to. That till this day has its tax consequences,
Right.
for example. On the other hand, you want to get the best talent in. And, Mark, what are the chances that, you're looking for 10 payroll people and all of them live, for example, where you are located in Barcelona, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those chances are minimal, right? But let's say, what if, 5 of them live in US or South America, and the other 5 live in Asia, right? Should that be an issue? So what is really the importance for the business? Is that attracting the best talent? Or is it like, no, we are going to be in these locations for whether it is tax purposes or...
I think that's already been decided by sort of market forces, in my experience, right? Also having been recruiting for lots of different roles in our own organization, you basically have to be flexible and agile and accommodating. If you force people to say you have to work in this one location, it's going to be really limiting your ability to source the best candidate from the best candidate pool. But then back in the payroll context, so now you have different countries, you need to quickly accommodate new locations, but you still want to get efficient, right? So how do you what's the secret to being able to do both, being agile, flexible, accommodating, but also be, harmonizing, standardizing, automating?
Yeah, indeed. Now, for me, the goal for payroll is always to aim like for 80% standardization. I don't believe personally in 100% standardization, just because even if you would succeed at it, it just limits the mindset of your team, because then everyone gets into this standardization operating modus. And that's not always ideal servicing the clients, whether it's an internal client or an external one. It just limits your ability to basically be adaptable. And especially in this fast changing world, that's what's really needed, right? You have to be able to open up new entities, new countries, and pretty fast. So if you're stuck in 100% standardization procedures, consequences of that is that it is harder to move fast.
Yeah.
While on the other hand, if you have zero standardization, that of course there will be issues with that as well, because then you're operating in chaos and the result will be the same. You cannot move quickly, right? So for us, at least, it's always like standardize as much as possible on these base procedures, right? That we have systems in place. And then the other 20% is all about being flexible, adaptable, and moving fast with the company. So if the company goes left, we move along. If it goes right, because payroll is here to support the business and the people.
Sorry, and it sounds like for you what you're describing is kind of a hybrid model, right? Where you want to create certain baseline standards, but not to the degree that it robs the specific countries of their ability and flexibility to work with the right delivery model or the right partners that are a good fit for them. So,
yeah, exactly.
Okay. So sort of outsourcing everything to one global partner based on what you're describing may not be the answer then, I assume, in your experience.
I mean, I know it from personal experience for all these companies that I worked for, and a lot of them have tried, of course, to outsource payroll completely, because whether it's a cost efficiency standpoint of having difficulty to find good people in the payroll team for various reasons. But I mean, if you standardize the payroll, it means you're going to give it to an external party who is going to have to manage not just you as a company, but potentially thousands of other clients. Meaning, for them, that it would be impossible to do that if they don't have a standardization in place. So from their perspective, I fully understand the reasoning for standardization. On the other hand, one of the biggest issues here is that the service will disappear because it's impossible to serve thousands of clients and give them all of your effort and attention, right? And then it's kind of a balancing act for the business to decide what is really more important, and is it actually really that cost efficient?
Yeah.
And so indeed, that's why we are looking for the best of both worlds, not settling just like, okay, it is what it is, and then we have to deal with the fact that the service is not there.
Yeah.
That's not really acceptable.
Okay, so I want to bring us a little bit back to one of the things we talked about before, which is reporting and analytics. And based on my experience when I talk with payroll professionals, in a lot of cases, historically, payroll professionals have been very focused on data for the sake of what they need to run their payroll in a more effective manner. And that makes complete sense. But I think there's an increasing realization that the payroll data has broad applicability beyond just serving the payroll department. And as you mentioned, it is very important and it's very valuable for HR professionals, for finance professionals, and other people running the business. So when we think then in this context about selecting and creating a global payroll solution, bringing all this information together, which on its own can be quite challenging, how should we structure this solution process, the vendor selection process? Does that mean we need to have a much more multifunctional team that comes together that helps to drive this kind of project?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So that's also one of the reasoning of payroll becoming more strategically important to the business, right? So I would definitely include whether it's rewards team, HR, finance, usually also IT because of the project management aspects.
Yeah.
So definitely several teams involved, because if it becomes a payroll project, then it's basically this kind of old school thinking, like we have certain details which we need to use to process the payroll correctly, accurately, and on time. And that's basically it, right? That's kind of the base function of payroll.
Right.
But if you cooperate and you show the importance of this to a rewards team, salary transparency, just to name one thing, right? Because I see also a lot of movement in the European market towards basically making all of the salaries of the employees transparent, right? Why should it be a secret?
Right.
Whether we are talking about gender gaps there. So one of the question is like, why should it be a secret?
I like that. That's a very progressive thought. In fact, I recall, I think there's a company in the US that's called Zappos that went exactly in this direction, where they publicized all employees' compensation data. I know there are some companies that are definitely moving in that direction that you're talking about.
So yeah, I think you will see those things in any company. For the same position, a male earns more than a female. Yeah, from a strategic point of view, that could be an item to kind of show new hires and attract talent, like we are operating in a transparent way. So that's kind of from the rewards side.
Yeah.
On the HR side, it could be workforce planning, different locations, staffing, but also retaining talent, right? Could you use data to kind of get some prediction in who's could be leaving the company? I mean, how is the management operating? What are the engagement scores there? Are there any indicators that there could be a risk for potential loss?
Yeah.
So many aspects, right? On the reporting side, it's basically unlimited. And in order to achieve that, we need to use more technology. So, I mean, looking for my own team in the future, payroll specialists, us working in payroll, communication is definitely always important. Technology skills, absolutely. Artificial intelligence, everything we can name there. And basically also advising employees. I don't think that, if anything, that will be more important to employees. Yeah. So that's where we can make the difference as us human beings, and not so much be worried about this whole standardization. Would it mean that our jobs will be lost? If anything, I think it will open up more opportunities for us to grow this payroll department.
Yeah, my experience, it's also about the detail, the granularity of information that you're able to put your hands on when you're looking at payroll versus other systems. You mentioned the example of severance pay, right? So it might be very important for the organization to understand what part of severance pay is statutory that you have to pay in a jurisdiction versus what was discretionary decided by the company to give to the employee. And in most finance and HR systems, it simply won't be possible to track that information. You just won't have it. In a payroll context, in all likelihood, you probably have different pay elements that capture statutory pay elements, statutory severance versus discretionary severance. And so you could run that sort of much more detailed, much more insightful analysis, just as one of the examples where granularity is really something that your payroll system and your payroll data is able to give you that you can't get out of other systems.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, for us, we of course understand the need for a good system. And now our job, if we want to take payrolls to that next level, is to also show the business the importance of all this. And that's why it's crucial, coming back to your previous questions, to to have all these stakeholders, bring them together and show what's the benefit for HR, for rewards, for finance, for all these different departments.
Yeah, I think a good point you made, and maybe something to end on, is that maybe we should stop talking about payroll projects, and that's really thinking way too small. We've got to look at it in a bigger context, I think, is sort of what I'm taking away from some of our discussion here. Really got to think about payroll together with HR, together with finance, and that's how we need to think about organizing projects and structuring transformation. And I suppose that takes us back full circle to the point at the beginning about your vision of having payroll become its own equivalent department that sits next to HR and finance, and that collaborates with these different stakeholders together to drive change across the organization.
No, if anything, we should be driving that, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying that we are not HR, we are not finance, we are not rewards. We are a standalone department, will be in the future, because of all these things, the wealth on information we have access to, which other departments don't, right? So finance can only see certain or in totals, they don't see on an employee level. HR, so this classical distinction between finance, just about totals and numbers, not really interested in people, versus HR, only interested in people, not really with the numbers. For us, we have to be everything.
So listen, Senad, we're coming to the end of the episode. One of the things that we like to do at the end is what we call our lightning round, which is basically rapid fire questions with quick answers from your side, whatever comes to mind first. So, are you ready? All right, question number one. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Payroll. No, absolutely not. No, I mean, probably a pilot, yeah.
Okay, question number two. For you, what are the quintessential qualities of a good payroll professional?
Analytical, very communicative, transparent, open, able to kind of advise. So one thing is to know something, other things to actually explain it to someone in basic terms.
Yeah.
And finally, what gives you the most satisfaction about your job?
Feedback, employee feedback, thanking us for the advice we have given them with their own personal, whether it's their personal income tax declaration, we have helped out on other types of questions related to their own finances.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something that is sometimes easy to forget, because at the end of the day, payroll is really serving the employees, right? And while sometimes people forget about the value that payroll adds and it's just taken for granted, I think when we do get that recognition and people really appreciate the help we provide and the insights that the payroll team is able to give, it's just a great feeling, right, to have helped someone an important part of their life experience. So great. As we're wrapping up, then, any shout outs, anything that you want to plug on the show here?
I think we have discussed kind of the future of payroll, the importance of it. Look, Mark, payroll has always been important, right? I think it's just now that we are kind of seeing this payroll getting on the forefront. And I'm just pleased to also see what's happening in the market. I mean, the highest positions in payroll were indeed like payroll manager, right? It was kind of the highest position you could get. Now we even have VPs of payroll.
Absolutely.
Look, you're absolutely right. I think throughout the pandemic, the last couple of years have been tough on everyone, but I think the one positive thing is it really has elevated the recognition for the payroll profession, and more people have come to see just how critical, mission critical payroll is in just about any organization out there. So Senad, it was really great having you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your perspective with us. This brings us to the end of today's episode. Hope you enjoyed the show wherever you were watching or listening to us. We have new episodes coming out every couple of weeks. You can find them on our YouTube channel, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. And please make sure you subscribe, click the like button. Love to get your support, and we'd love to spread the word about this talk show. So thank you again for being with us today, and hope we'll talk to you again soon. Until then, take care.